What does it feel like to be on top of the world? To have the perfect marriage, a loving millionaire husband, and your first child just days away from being in your arms. For Breonna Hayes, it felt like sunshine, until a single manila envelope arrived at her own baby shower. Inside wasn't a congratulations card. It was a stack of legal documents, cold and sterile, with 2 words circled in her husband's handwriting: "Sign here." This isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's a story of devastating betrayal, a web of lies that runs deeper than anyone could imagine, and the terrifying strength a mother finds when she has nothing left to lose. The California sun, a buttery yellow, spilled into the sprawling living room of the Pacific Palisades mansion. It was a day curated for perfection, much like Breonna Hayes' life itself. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a turquoise infinity pool that seemed to melt into the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Inside the decor was a symphony of cream gold and a gentle powder blue, the theme for the baby shower. Her baby shower. At 32, Breonna was living a life most people only saw in magazines. She radiated a serene glow, her hands instinctively cradling the taut swell of her stomach, where their son, kicked with impatient energy. She was 38 weeks along a vessel of life and love, and today was the celebration of that miracle. Her husband, Harrison Cole, was the architect of this gilded world. A tech mogul who had shot to fame with his company, Innovatech Solutions. He was sharp, devastatingly handsome, and possessed a charisma that could bend rooms to his will. He'd just turned 40, and was at the peak of his power. This baby, he'd told her, was the final piece. The legacy. As her friends, the wives of other tech giants and venture capitalists, laughed and opened gifts, a tiny cashmere sweater from Burberry, a silver rattle from Tiffany's Breonna, scanned the room for him. Harrison had promised to be there. He'd been distant lately, consumed by a new project he called Project Chimera, but he had sworn he wouldn't miss this. "He's probably just on a call, honey," her best friend Chloe whispered, squeezing her hand. Chloe, a razor-sharp family law attorney, had a 6th sense for trouble, but even she seemed lulled by the day's perfection. Just then the polished glass front door opened. It wasn't Harrison. It was a courier holding a slim, stiff manila envelope. He looked uncomfortable, a stark contrast to the opulence around him. "Delivery for Mrs. Breonna Cole," he said, his voice flat. Breonna frowned. "I wasn't expecting anything." She took the envelope, her name typed in a cold, impersonal font. It felt strangely heavy. She excused herself, moving toward the quiet solitude of Harrison's home office, a room of dark mahogany and smoked glass that always smelled faintly of his expensive cologne. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tore the seal. Inside wasn't a document from Innovatech. It wasn't a contract or a deed. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage. The words swam before her eyes, blurring into an incoherent mess of legal jargon. Her breath hitched. This had to be a mistake, a cruel, elaborate prank. She scrolled down the page, her heart hammering against her ribs. Petitioner Harrison Cole. Respondent Breonna Hayes. Grounds for divorce, irreconcilable differences. Her world tilted on its axis. Irreconcilable differences. They had just finalized the nursery. They had picked a name, Leo. Last week, he had kissed her stomach and told the baby he couldn't wait to teach him how to sail. Tucked behind the petition was a single folded sheet of Harrison's personal stationery. There was no letter, no explanation, no apology. Just a note scrawled in his familiar, decisive handwriting, the same handwriting that signed multi-million-dollar deals. Briona, my attorneys have enclosed a settlement offer. It is more than generous. I suggest you accept it. Do not contest this. Sign here. An arrow pointed to a signature line on the settlement agreement, and beneath it, a final gut-wrenching sentence. I have moved on. I expect you to do the same. A wave of nausea and dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Harrison. She fumbled to open it, praying for an explanation for him to say it was all a terrible error. The message contained only a single sentence. It wasn't for her. It was a screenshot of a flight confirmation. 2 first-class tickets to Bora Bora, departing from LAX in 3 hours. The passengers listed were Harrison Cole and Isabella Rossi. Isabella Rossi, a name that struck Briona like a physical blow. Isabella was a junior marketing executive at Innovatech. She was 26 with raven hair, ambitious eyes, and a predatory grace. Briona had met her at a company gala a few months ago and had felt a prickle of unease, a feeling she had dismissed as hormonal paranoia. Now that paranoia curdled into a horrifying certainty. From the living room, she could hear the sound of her friends laughing, the rustle of wrapping paper, the celebration of a life that had just been declared dead. She stood in the cold, silent office, holding the death certificate of her marriage, the ashes of her perfect life coating her tongue. Her water hadn't broken, but she felt a different kind of rupture, a deep internal tearing that was far more painful. The baby kicked a frantic, desperate rhythm as if he knew, as if he could feel his mother's world and his own imploding before he had even taken his first breath. The laughter from the baby shower became a muffled, mocking echo as Briona sank into Harrison's leather chair. The scent of his cologne, once a comfort, now felt like poison gas suffocating her. She stared at the divorce papers, the words no longer blurry, but etched into her brain with brutal clarity. Generous. The word was a slap in the face. The settlement offered her a one-time payment of $5 million and the downtown condo they kept for occasional city nights. In return, she was to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and waive any and all future claims to Harrison's fortune, his company, and any assets acquired during their 5-year marriage. His net worth was estimated to be north of $500 million. It wasn't generosity. It was an insult. It was hush money. Chloe found her minutes later, her cheerful expression dissolving into one of horror as she saw the documents spread across the desk. "Oh my God, Ames," she breathed, rushing to her side. Chloe's legal mind immediately took over her eyes, scanning the pages with a professional fury. This is a predator's contract. He had this drafted by William Sterling. Sterling is a shark, the kind of lawyer you hire to crush someone, not to amicably separate. Briona could only shake her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. He's in Bora Bora, Chloe, with Isabella Rossi. The name hung in the air. Chloe's face hardened. That viper. I saw the way she looked at him at the Christmas party. She knelt in front of Briona, taking her hands. Okay, listen to me. You are not signing anything. Do you hear me? Not a single thing. We are going to fight this. But the fight felt galaxies away. The first battle was simply surviving the next hour. The baby shower had to be ended, with a composure she didn't know she possessed. Briona walked back into the living room, a brittle smile plastered on her face. She thanked everyone for coming, blaming a sudden onset of fatigue, a common ailment in the final weeks of pregnancy. Her friends, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, but oblivious to its cataclysmic cause, packed up the gifts and left with sympathetic smiles and well-wishes for the birth. As the last car pulled away, the silence in the sprawling mansion was absolute and terrifying. The meticulously arranged presents, the half-eaten cake, the blue balloons bobbing gently against the ceiling, they were all artifacts from a life that no longer existed. Harrison returned 3 days later, tanned and utterly unapologetic. He walked into the house as if he were a visitor, his eyes cool and distant. Isabella was not with him, but her victory clung to him like a cheap perfume. "Did you get the papers?" he asked, not as a husband, but as a CEO, confirming receipt of a memo. Briona stood in the foyer, her hands on her belly, a silent guardian of the son he had so easily discarded. "How could you, Harrison, at my baby shower?" "Our son is due any day." He had the audacity to look annoyed. "I wanted it to be clean, Briona. A swift, decisive action. Dragging it out would be more painful. I'm being efficient." Efficient? The word was so cold, so transactional it stole her breath. "We are not a business deal. You're dissolving Harrison. This is our life, our family. The life we had is over," he said, his voice flat. "Isabella and I are in love. I'm starting a new life. I thought you of all people would understand the need for a strategic pivot." The corporate jargon was a shield protecting him from the messy human carnage he was creating. He was optimizing his life, divesting himself of an asset, his pregnant wife, that no longer served his portfolio of happiness. "You need to be out by the end of the week," he continued, glancing at his Patek Philippe watch. "The condo is ready. I've had your essential things moved there. The rest can go into storage." "My things," she whispered, looking around the house. She had designed every piece of furniture, every shade of paint, every piece of art, chosen with love and care. "This is my home." "It's my house, Briona." He corrected her, the cruelty in his voice now undisguised. "It is an asset listed under the Innovatech Holding Company. Just like the cars. And the jet." The truth of her situation crashed down on her. She hadn't just been a wife. She had been a resident manager in a gilded cage, and her lease was up. The next few days were a blur of humiliation and heartache. Movers hired by Harrison's assistant came and packed her life into boxes, their polite sympathy more agonizing than open pity. She packed a bag for the hospital herself, her hands shaking as she folded tiny onesies and receiving blankets. She dismantled the nursery piece by piece, taking the crib, the changing table, and the rocking chair they had assembled together just a month before. That was the moment she finally broke sobbing over a piece of unfinished wood, the ghost of his laughter echoing in her ears. She moved into the sterile, impersonal condo in Century City. It was luxurious, with stunning views of the city lights, but it was cold and empty, a high-tech prison. There were no memories here, no echoes of love. Just the hum of the climate control and the oppressive weight of her new reality. She was alone, 38.5 weeks pregnant, and about to face the biggest challenge of her life, while the man who had promised to be by her side was building a new life on the ruins of hers. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed, she felt the first sharp twinge of a contraction. It was not time, not yet. It was just her body and her baby reacting to the immense stress. But it was a warning. The clock was ticking. The first meeting in Chloe's downtown LA office was like stepping out of a fog and into a war room. The space was sleek, modern, and intimidating. lined with legal books that seemed to stand as soldiers at attention. Chloe in her element was no longer just a comforting friend. She was a commander, a strategist, her mind already mapping out the battlefield. "Okay," Chloe said, sliding a bottle of water towards Briona. "First things first. His offer is garbage, and we're treating it as such. We're rejecting it outright. William Sterling expects you to be a weeping, hysterical mess who will take the money and run. We are not going to give him that satisfaction." Briona nodded, a flicker of strength igniting within her. "He called me an asset he was divesting. He wants efficiency. Let's show him what inefficiency looks like." "That's my girl." Chloe grinned, a fierce, protective light in her eyes. "Now, under California law, this is a community property state. That means anything earned or acquired during the marriage is considered 50-50. His claim that the house and other assets are under a corporate holding doesn't just make it his. We're going to argue that you, as his wife and partner, contributed to that success. You hosted the dinners, you charmed the investors, you created the stable home environment that allowed him to build his empire. Your contribution was non-monetary, but it has immense value." Chloe began to type furiously, a plan forming in real time. "We are filing a counter-petition immediately. We will demand a temporary restraining order to freeze all major assets. He won't be able to move money, sell stock, or transfer property without a court order. That will get his attention." She continued. "Next, we demand a forensic accounting of all his assets, personal and corporate. Harrison is smart. He's probably been planning this for months, moving money around, setting up shell corporations trying to hide his true worth. We need to find every single dollar." The process was grueling. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal documents, financial statements, and long, draining meetings. Briona, her body heavy and weary, waddled into depositions and mediations, forcing herself to remain calm and composed, as Harrison's lawyer, William Sterling, tried to paint her as a gold-digging trophy wife. Harrison attended only when legally compelled, his presence sucking the air from the room. He refused to look at Briona, directing all his comments to Sterling. He portrayed their marriage as a simple arrangement, where he provided a lifestyle, and she existed. He claimed her interior design career had been a mere hobby he had funded. "Mrs. Cole has not worked a day in our marriage," Sterling argued, in one meeting his voice dripping with condescension. "She has lived a life of extreme privilege, funded entirely by Mr. Cole's genius and hard work." "I was his partner," Briona stated, her voice shaking but firm. "I managed our homes. I organized the events that secured him millions in venture capital. I gave up my own burgeoning design firm to support his vision. A vision that has paid for your couture wardrobe and your Escalade, I presume?" Sterling sneered. It was a low blow designed to rattle her, but Chloe was ready. "A vision, Mr. Sterling," Chloe cut in, her voice like ice, "that was built on the foundation of a stable marriage my client, Cole, provided. A marriage Mr. Cole has chosen to detonate with a 26-year-old subordinate days before his wife is due to give birth to his first and only child. Let's not pretend this is about anything other than your client's sordid affair and his attempt to financially punish the woman who is carrying his heir." The shot hit its mark. Sterling stiffened, and even Harrison flinched. Meanwhile, Isabella Rossi was not staying in the shadows. She was a ghost haunting Briona's every waking moment. Her Instagram account, once private, was now public. There were pictures of her and Harrison on a yacht in Marina del Rey, clinking champagne glasses. A picture of her wearing a diamond tennis bracelet that Briona recognized as one she had admired weeks ago. The most painful post was a picture of Isabella's hand, now adorned with a massive canary diamond ring resting on the steering wheel of Harrison's Aston Martin. The caption read, "The future is bright." She had effectively moved into Briona's life before the bed was even cold. Friends, or people Briona had thought were friends, sent her screenshots, their messages dripping with pity. "Have you seen this? I'm so sorry, Briona." Each message was another twist of the knife. Chloe hired a forensic accountant, a gruff, no-nonsense man named Robert Fisher, who began to dig. His initial findings were troubling. "He's good," Robert told them over a conference call. "There are layers of LLCs and offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. It's a maze. He's been siphoning money from Innovatech into these accounts for at least a year, probably under the guise of R&D or acquisitions. He was planning his exit strategy long before he told you." The premeditation was what hurt the most. This wasn't a sudden infatuation. It was a calculated long-term plan. While she was picking out cribs, he was consulting with lawyers and accountants, dismantling their life in secret. As her due date loomed, the pressure mounted. The stress was causing Braxton Hicks' contractions to become more frequent and intense. Her doctor warned her to rest to avoid any undue anxiety. It was an impossible request. Her entire world was a source of anxiety. One evening, as she sat alone in the condo, sorting through the baby clothes, she'd managed to salvage a wave of despair washed over her. She was facing the fight of her life for her future and her sons against a man she once loved, a man who now saw her as nothing more than a line item on a balance sheet. He had the money, the power, and a team of ruthless lawyers. All she had was Chloe, a mountain of evidence to uncover, and the tiny, innocent life kicking inside her. It didn't feel like a fair fight, but as she folded a tiny pair of blue socks, her resolve hardened into steel. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Leo. And for him, she would become a warrior. The first real contraction hit her at 2 a.m. It was a searing, all-encompassing pain that ripped her from a restless sleep. She gasped, clutching her belly as her entire body tensed. This was it. There was no mistaking the raw power of it. For a frantic moment, pure panic seized her. She was alone. The person who was supposed to be holding her hand, timing her contractions and telling her to breathe, was thousands of miles away psychologically, if not physically. Her hands shaking, she called Chloe, her voice a strained whisper. "It's time." "I'm on my way," Chloe said, her voice instantly alert, all business and no panic. "Did you call your doctor?" "Yes," she said to come in. "Okay, breathe, Briona. Just breathe. I'll be there in 20 minutes. We can do this." "We." The word was a lifeline. Chloe arrived, a whirlwind of efficiency, grabbing the hospital bag, helping Briona down to the car. Her calm presence, a stark contrast to Briona's rising terror. The drive to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center was a blur of traffic lights and escalating waves of pain. In the sterile triage room, a nurse asked the routine questions. "Is the father on his way?" The question felt like a physical blow. "No," Briona managed to say, her voice tight. He won't be here." The nurse's sympathetic glance was almost unbearable. Chloe stepped in. "I'm her birth partner." The hours that followed were a grueling marathon of pain exhaustion and fierce determination. Chloe was a rock, holding her hand, wiping her brow, advocating for her with the doctors and nurses. Through the haze of agony, Briona focused on one thing: the image of her son's face. This beautiful, innocent child deserved to be brought into the world with love, not surrounded by the ghosts of betrayal. At 11:30 a.m., after 14 hours of labor, she gave one final primal push. The world exploded into the sound of a tiny, furious cry. "He's here, Briona. He's here!" Chloe sobbed, tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. The doctor placed the warm, wailing baby on her chest. He was perfect. A mess of dark hair, scrunched up features, and tiny flailing fists. Briona looked into his eyes, and the entire world with all its pain and chaos melted away. There was only him. "Hello, Leo," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm your mummy. I love you so much." It was in this sacred, peaceful moment that the door to the delivery room opened. Harrison stood there, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, looking more like he was arriving for a board meeting than the birth of his child. His hair was perfect. His face was a mask of detached curiosity. Standing just behind him in the hallway, Briona caught a glimpse of Isabella, who quickly ducked out of sight. She had driven him here. The thought was so vile, it made Briona's stomach churn. "So," Harrison said, his voice void of any warmth. "That's him." Chloe stepped forward, her body a physical barrier between him and the bed. "You have a hell of a nerve showing up now." "He's my son. I have a right to be here," Harrison stated, his eyes flicking to the baby, then to the chart at the foot of the bed. "What's his name?" "Leo Michael Hayes." Briona said, her voice quiet but unyielding. Michael was her father's name. Hayes was her name. Harrison's jaw tightened. "His last name is Cole. He is a Cole. You forfeited the right to make those decisions when you served me divorce papers at my baby shower." Briona shot back, a protective fire surging through her. "His legal name is Hayes. When he is old enough, he can decide for himself if he wants the name of the man who abandoned him before he was even born." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. The nurses looked on, deeply uncomfortable. Harrison's demeanor shifted from cold to menacing. He took a step forward, ignoring Chloe. "Don't be foolish, Briona. This will have legal ramifications. You are making this unnecessarily difficult." "Get out," she said, her voice low and trembling with rage. "I am not leaving until we've discussed the birth certificate. I said get out." Her voice cracked, a raw, primal scream that came from the depths of her soul. "You are not welcome here. This moment is for me and my son. You gave up your place here. Now leave." For the first time, a flicker of something shock, maybe even a sliver of shame, crossed Harrison's face. He looked at the tiny baby in Briona's arms, then at her face ravaged by childbirth and fury. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the expensive click of his shoes echoing down the hallway. The aftermath of his visit was devastating. The brief, beautiful peace of Leo's birth had been shattered. But as Briona held her son close, she realized something profound. Harrison's betrayal had been revealed in yet another layer. It wasn't just that he had left her for another woman. It was that he was incapable of genuine love and connection. He saw his own son not as a miracle to be cherished, but as an asset, a legacy to be branded with his name. His visit wasn't about meeting his child. It was a power play, an attempt to assert control. Later that day, a hospital social worker came to her room. "Mrs. Cole," she began hesitantly, "your husband's attorney, a Mr. Sterling, has been in contact with hospital administration. He is asserting Mr. Cole's paternal rights and is contesting the last name on the birth registration forms. The audacity was breathtaking. He hadn't held his son. He hadn't asked if she was okay, but he had already sicked his lawyer on her. "Tell Mr. Sterling," Briona said, her voice dangerously calm as she rocked her sleeping son, "that he and his client have just started a war they are not prepared to win." She was no longer just a wronged wife. She was a mother, a lioness protecting her cub, and Harrison Cole was about to find out just how sharp her claws could be. The weeks following Leo's birth were a surreal blend of tender, sleepless nights and aggressive legal skirmishes. The fight over Leo's last name became the first major battleground. Harrison pushed by Isabella, and his own ego was trying to legally force the name Cole, framing Briona as vindictive and unstable. It was Chloe who unearthed the strategy that would turn the tide. "He's trying to establish a clear paternal link for inheritance and legacy purposes," Chloe explained during a late-night call as Briona nursed Leo. "It's not about love. It's about control of the Cole brand. But we can use his own actions against him." In court, Chloe presented a timeline that was damning. She showed the date the divorce papers were served, the flight itinerary to Bora Bora, the social media posts from Isabella and Harrison's 3-minute appearance at the hospital. Mr. Cole's interest in his son, Chloe argued to the judge, only seems to manifest when it concerns legal branding. He was not present for the birth. He has made no effort to see the child, since yet he has expended considerable legal resources to control the child's name. This is not the behavior of a loving father. It is the behavior of a corporate executive managing an asset. The judge, a stern but fair woman in her 60s, agreed. She ruled that the child would be known as Leo Michael Hayes, with the option to add Cole later if all parties consented when the child was older. It was the first real victory, and it felt monumental. But the larger war over the financial settlement raged on. Robert Fisher, the forensic accountant, was hitting brick wall after brick wall. The offshore accounts were masterfully hidden behind shell corporations with names like Chimera Holdings and Aegean Ventures. "This Project Chimera he was talking about," Briona mused one afternoon, bouncing Leo on her lap. "It wasn't a project at Innovatech. It was his project to leave me." The thought sparked an idea. "Chloe, can we get access to his corporate communications emails server logs?" "It's a long shot," Chloe admitted. "We'd have to prove a direct link between corporate funds being used for personal gain to convince a judge to pierce the corporate veil. But it's not impossible." The break came from an unexpected source. David Chen Harrison's co-founder and chief technology officer at Innovatech reached out to Chloe. David had known Briona since before she and Harrison were married. He was a quiet, brilliant man who had always treated her with kindness and respect. "I can't sit by and watch this happen," David said, his voice tense over a secure line. "What Harrison is doing to Briona is one thing, but he's also putting the company at risk. I think he's being played." They met secretly at a coffee shop far from their usual haunts. David looked exhausted. "Harrison has given Isabella Rossi an incredible amount of access," he explained. "She's no longer in marketing. He's created a new position for her Chief Strategy Officer. It's a sham title, but it gives her access to everything our proprietary code, our Q4 projections, our client lists." He slid a flash drive across the table. "I've been running my own security diagnostics. There have been massive data transfers from our servers late at night, routed through an encrypted proxy to an external IP address. The transfers started about 6 months ago. The user who authorized them, Isabella Rossi." Chloe's eyes widened. "Where is the data going?" "I'm still tracing it," David said. "But my gut tells me it's going to a competitor, specifically a rival company called Nexus Dynamics. They've been a thorn in our side for years. In the last few months, they've miraculously anticipated our every move, launching competing products just weeks before ours." The pieces began to click into place with terrifying speed. Isabella wasn't just a home wrecker. She was a corporate spy. "She didn't just want Harrison's money," Briona whispered, horrified. "She wants to destroy his company. And she's using him to do it," Chloe added. "She manufactured this perfect romance, isolated him from his real friends and partners, and convinced him she was the only one who truly understood his genius. He's so arrogant, he couldn't see he was being manipulated." With David's information, Chloe had the ammunition she needed. She filed an emergency motion not in family court, but in business court, presenting evidence of potential corporate espionage and malfeasance that threatened the value of Innovatech Solutions, a primary asset in the divorce proceedings. The motion requested a court-appointed receiver to take temporary control of the company to prevent further damage and asset stripping. This was no longer a messy divorce. It was a corporate thriller. Isabella wasn't just a mistress. She was a highly sophisticated operative. She hadn't stumbled into a relationship with a rich man. She had targeted him. Her affair with Harrison was just the method of entry, the key card to get inside the vault. Her goal was the entire kingdom, not just half of the king's treasure. The night before the hearing, Briona looked at the evidence they had compiled: server logs, financial transfers, David's sworn affidavit. It was a portrait of a breathtakingly audacious betrayal. Isabella hadn't just stolen her husband. She had turned him into a weapon to destroy his own life's work. And Harrison, blinded by his ego and infatuation, had handed her the gun and pointed it at his own head. The next day in court, they wouldn't just be fighting for a fair settlement. They would be exposing a conspiracy that would bring Harrison Cole's entire empire crashing down. The courtroom was a sterile, cold environment, a world away from the warm, sunlit home Briona once shared with Harrison. But for the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a general on the verge of a decisive victory. Harrison and William Sterling sat at the opposing table, looking supremely confident. They clearly believed this was just another legal maneuver, a desperate attempt by Briona to gain leverage. They had no idea about the corporate bomb that was about to detonate. The judge, a sharp-eyed man named Judge Alistair Finch, reviewed the emergency motion with a deep frown. "Ms. Davies," he said to Chloe, "these are extraordinarily serious allegations. You are alleging active corporate espionage that directly impacts the marital assets in question." "We are, Your Honor," Chloe replied, her voice ringing with confidence. "And we have proof." For the next hour, Chloe laid out the case with chilling precision. She presented David Chen's affidavit. She showed the logs of the data transfers, time-stamped and authenticated. She cross-referenced them with Isabella Rossi's security badge swipes, showing she was in the building at Harrison's executive terminal at the exact times of the largest data breaches. Then came the financial evidence. Robert Fisher, the forensic accountant, took the stand and explained how he had traced the labyrinth of shell corporations. He demonstrated how Innovatech funds had been funneled into Chimera Holdings, and from there used to purchase lavish gifts for Isabella the Canary diamond ring, a down payment on a Beverly Hills condo, all disguised as consulting fees. But the masterstroke was the final piece of evidence David Chen had uncovered just the night before. He had finally cracked the destination IP address of the data transfers. It didn't just lead to Nexus Dynamics. It led directly to a private server registered to I. Rossi, which was physically located in an office leased by none other than the CEO of Nexus Dynamics, Jonathan Pike. As the evidence mounted, Harrison's confident smirk slowly evaporated, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed expression of disbelief. He kept glancing from the documents to his lawyer, then back again, as if hoping one of them would declare it all a forgery. This wasn't part of his strategic pivot. This was a hostile takeover of his entire reality. "Mr. Cole," Judge Finch said, his voice heavy with authority, "were you aware that your new associate, Ms. Rossi, was systematically transferring your company's most sensitive intellectual property to your chief competitor?" Harrison swallowed his composure, shattering. "No. That's impossible. She loves me. She believes in my vision." "It appears Ms. Rossi's vision," the judge retorted dryly, "involved a significant transfer of your assets into her own." The final devastating blow came when Chloe called her last witness, a man named Frank Miller, a private investigator she had hired weeks ago, and told Miller, Chloe asked, "You were tasked with investigating the background of one Isabella Rossi. What did you find?" "Frank." A grizzled ex-cop spoke in a gravelly monotone. "Isabella Rossi isn't her real name. She was born Sofia Petrova in Bulgaria. She has a history. She did the exact same thing to a tech CEO in Germany 5 years ago. Ruined him, got a multi-million-dollar settlement and disappeared. Before that, a hedge fund manager in London. She's a professional. She targets powerful, arrogant men, inflates their egos, and then bleeds them dry while selling their secrets to the highest bidder." A wave of sickness washed over Briona as she listened. It hadn't been about love or passion or even simple greed. It had been a job. Harrison wasn't the love of Isabella's life. He was her mark. Harrison looked utterly broken. The man who commanded boardrooms, who saw himself as a master of the universe, was exposed as a fool, a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. His affair wasn't a passionate romance. It was a business transaction where he was the product being sold. Judge Finch granted their motion immediately. He placed Innovatech into temporary receivership to protect it from further damage and froze every known asset belonging to Harrison Cole and Isabella Rossi, a.k.a. Sofia Petrova. He also authorized a federal investigation into the corporate espionage. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Harrison was suspended as CEO of his own company. The board of directors, led by David Chen, began proceedings to oust him permanently. News of the scandal hit the financial press like a thunderclap, and Innovatech's stock plummeted. Briona left the courthouse, and for the first time in months, she could breathe. It wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. That evening, Harrison came to the condo. It was the first time he had sought her out. He looked like a ghost, pale, haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. "She's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "I went to the condo. It's empty. The accounts are cleared out. Everything's gone." Briona simply looked at him, holding Leo protectively in her arms. There was no triumph in her, only a profound sadness for the man he used to be and the man he had become. "I'm sorry, Briona," he whispered, his eyes finally meeting hers. They were filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. "I was a fool. I threw everything away. Please, can we fix this?" She looked from his broken face to the perfect sleeping face of her son, the son he had called a Cole, but treated like a footnote, the son he had abandoned in pursuit of a fantasy that turned out to be a corporate hit job. "There is nothing to fix, Harrison," she said, her voice soft but absolute. You didn't just break our marriage. You incinerated it. The only thing left for us to do is sign the papers. But this time, they'll be on my terms." He stared at her, finally understanding. The power had shifted completely. He had lost everything: his company, his fortune, his reputation. And in the process, he had lost the one person who had ever truly believed in his vision, long before the millions and the magazine covers. He had lost his family, and that was a loss from which there was no recovery. The final meeting took place not in a confrontational courtroom, but in a quiet, soulless conference room on the 40th floor of a Century City skyscraper. The air was thick with the unspoken history of broken promises and shattered trust. 6 months had passed since the explosive hearing that had decapitated Harrison's empire. Today was the formal surrender. Harrison sat opposite Breonna, a ghost of the titan she had married. His bespoke suit, once a symbol of his power, now seemed to hang off his diminished frame. The confident, predatory gleam in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted exhaustion. Beside him, William Sterling, the legal shark who had once sneered at Breonna, was subdued and meticulously polite. The power in the room no longer belonged to them. Chloe, radiating a calm and absolute authority, slid the final settlement agreement across the polished table. It was a masterpiece of legal fortification, a document designed not for revenge, but for permanent, unassailable security. "The terms are as we discussed," Chloe stated, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. "Ms. Hayes will receive sole legal and physical custody of their son, Leo Michael Hayes. Mr. Cole is granted supervised visitation twice a month, contingent on the successful completion of a court-mandated therapy program. The Pacific Palisades property will be transferred unencumbered to Ms. Hayes. The financial settlement, as detailed in Exhibit C, provides a lump sum payment and establishes a trust for the child's future education and well-being. In return, Ms. Hayes waives all future claims to Mr. Cole's remaining assets or future earnings." Harrison didn't even read the document. He simply stared at Breonna, his eyes searching for something. Forgiveness, perhaps, or a flicker of the love he had so carelessly thrown away. He found neither. Breonna's expression was serene, composed, and as impenetrable as glass. She was no longer his emotional battleground. He picked up the pen, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly, and signed his name. The decisive, arrogant signature she once knew was now a shaky, hesitant scrawl. When it was her turn, Breonna's hand was steady. Her signature was a firm, clear declaration of her independence. With that final stroke of ink, 5 years of her life, a marriage she had believed in, was legally dissolved. There was no triumph in the moment, only a profound and quiet relief, the feeling of a heavy, suffocating weight finally being lifted from her chest. The first day she walked back into the Pacific Palisades mansion as its sole owner was the hardest. The house, once a symbol of her dreams, felt haunted. Every room held a memory, every surface a ghost of a life that had been a lie. She could almost smell the faint, lingering scent of his cologne in the office, see the phantom of Isabella's triumphant smile in the reflection of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her first act was not to unpack, but to cleanse. She threw open every window and door, letting the salty Pacific breeze rush through the cavernous rooms as if to physically blow away the residue of betrayal. The next day the contractors arrived. The transformation was radical and therapeutic. The dark, masculine mahogany office, the epicenter of her world's collapse, was the first to be gutted. It was reborn as Leo's playroom, the walls painted a cheerful, sunny yellow. An artist was hired to paint a whimsical mural of gentle sea creatures, otters holding hands and smiling whales across the largest wall. The cold, minimalist living room, with its untouchable white sofas designed for impressing guests, was remade into a warm, inviting family space. She chose a deep blue, comfortable sectional sofa. You could actually sink into soft rugs where a baby could crawl and low, sturdy tables. She filled the shelves not with abstract sculptures, but with framed photographs, Leo's toothless grin, Chloe holding him at the hospital pictures of her own parents. She was reclaiming the space, infusing it with authentic life and love. A year flew by in a beautiful blur of motherhood's milestones. It was a year of firsts. Leo's first crawl across the new soft rug. His first word, Mama. A sound that filled her with more joy than any diamond bracelet ever had. His first wobbly steps, taken on the lawn overlooking the ocean. The sleepless nights were no longer filled with anxiety and heartbreak, but with the quiet comfort of rocking a teething baby, his small, warm body curled trustingly against hers. She found a profound, grounding joy in the simple, messy realities of raising a child, the pureed carrots in her hair, the endless rereading of picture books, the sound of his uninhibited giggles echoing through the halls of the house she had truly made her own. Harrison's supervised visits were a sad recurring postscript to their story. He would arrive punctually, always dressed in clothes that were just a little too formal, a man visiting a foreign country whose customs he didn't understand. He brought extravagant gifts, a tiny drivable Lamborghini for a 1-year-old, a complex drone that was years beyond his comprehension, and seemed baffled when Leo was more fascinated by the cardboard box it came in. During one visit, Brianna watched from the kitchen as Harrison tried to engage with his son in the playroom. "Leo, look," he said, holding up a tablet. "This is a projection of Innovatech's Q4 growth from my last year as CEO. It's a perfect logarithmic curve." Leo, babbling happily, picked up a soft block and tried to put it in his mouth. Harrison sighed, the deep, weary sigh of a man who had lost the thread of his own life. He was a stranger to his own son, a visitor in a home that was no longer his, speaking a language of success and ambition that had no meaning here. Brianna felt a distant clinical pity for him. He was no longer the monster who had destroyed her life. He was just a broken man, paying the long, lonely price for his choices. Meanwhile, Sofia Petrova, the woman formerly known as Isabella Rossi, had her glamorous reign of destruction brought to an end. An Interpol notice caught up with her in Monaco, where she was already deeply enmeshed in the life of a Russian oligarch. Her extradition was swift. The subsequent trial was a media sensation, laying bare her years of sophisticated, predatory fraud. Harrison was compelled to testify a public humiliation that cemented his fall from grace. Brianna's design firm, which she relaunched as Hayes & Co., became her professional salvation. Her story, whispered through the elite circles of Los Angeles, gave her an unexpected allure. She was not just a designer. She was a survivor. Clients weren't just hiring her for her impeccable taste. They were drawn to her quiet strength. Her philosophy was simple. She created sanctuaries. She specialized in transforming houses into homes, spaces that nurtured the people within them. Her first major client was a recently divorced actress who wanted a home that was a fortress of peace for her and her children. The project was a resounding success, featured in Architectural Digest, and her career took flight. One warm evening, long after Leo was asleep, Briona sat on the veranda overlooking the now peaceful ocean. The night was quiet, the only sound the gentle rhythm of the waves. She was scrolling through the news on her tablet when a small article caught her eye. Fallen tech mogul. Harrison Cole announces new life coaching venture, promises to teach secrets of resilient success. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face. There was no anger, no bitterness, not even a flicker of schadenfreude. There was only the vast, peaceful emptiness of indifference. The man in that article was a character from a book she had read a long time ago, a story about someone else. His new venture, a desperate attempt to rebrand his monumental failure as a lesson in resilience, was so profoundly ironic, it was almost poetic. She put the tablet down and walked to Leo's room. He was asleep in his crib, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. One hand curled around a worn teddy bear. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating his perfect, peaceful face. In that moment, the full measure of her new reality settled over her. She had been betrayed in the most brutal way imaginable. She had lost a husband, a marriage, and the life she had thought was hers. But in the ashes of that life, she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. She had built a new world from scratch, a world filled with authentic joy, purpose, and the overwhelming, unconditional love of her son. Harrison, with all his millions and his ambition, was the poorest man she knew. She standing here in her sanctuary, with her thriving business and her beautiful boy, was the richest woman in the world. She had everything that truly mattered. She was finally, truly home. Briona's story is a harrowing reminder that the most devastating betrayals often come from the people we trust the most. It's a story about the illusion of a perfect life and the terrifying reality that can hide just beneath the surface. But more than that, it's a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unshakable strength of a mother's love. She didn't just survive, she rebuilt her world stronger and more beautiful than before on her own terms. What would you have done in Briona's position? Could you find the strength to fight back when your world imploded just days before giving birth? We all face battles in our lives, and stories like this remind us of the power we hold within ourselves. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear a story of strength and survival. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless. Thank you for listening.